Hello everyone, my name's Reese. Welcome back to Threes to Wound. Today it's a big bunny of fisticuffs. It's a tactical battle report between two teams that we haven't had on the channel as of yet. We've got the Ecclesiarchy, or the Sisters of Battle, going up against the Rock'em Sock'em Robots. We've got the Admech in the Hunter Clade as well. I've only played against the Hunter Clade once before, so I'm a little bit nervous about what they're going to bring to the battlefield. I like their list, but I'm not sure. I know a lot of guns could be in store here. I know they've got some close combat. They've got ways to chain units. They've got a lot of interesting things. And for myself, I haven't taken the Sisters of Battle before, so please, if I pilot them terribly, I apologize in advance, but I'm going to do my best to make them shine on the battlefield. It's an interesting way I've built the team, mainly due to models, but it's kind of how I probably would have done it anyway. And they're a bit different for me. I've been playing a lot of Wormblade recently, so going to a team that has power armor, I'm pretty excited about having a 3-up save. Before we get started, if you can all do me one big favor, if you can just click the subscribe button down below. I know a lot of people say this in the wonderful world of YouTube, but those subscribes mean a whole bunch, and they're what allows me to keep making these videos for you guys. This is what I want to keep doing. I want to keep putting this content out on a very regular basis for you, and that's a little way you guys can keep going to keep this channel pumping and knocking out some great content. So let's stop mucking around. Let's jump in and check out how the game goes. For today's mission, we're playing Search and Retrieve. This is mission 1.2 from the Octarius book, and as you can see there's a predetermined setup of the terrain, and the mission there is basically to search those scrap piles to try and find the relic. To find that relic, you have to use the search for relic, which costs you 1 AP, which basically whenever you get an operative within triangle of those scrap piles, you can search. You then roll the dice, and on a 6 you've found the relic. Once you find the relic, you place down an objective marker that can be picked up, and that'll get you extra bonus points at the end. To secure the relic, you can use the pickup action, and while you're carrying it, you are unable to dash. There's extra mission equipment you can take here as well if you want, the Archeo Auspex, and this basically lets you add 1 to your dice roll when you search for the relic. To score points in this mission, each time a friendly operative performs the search for relic action, you score 1 VP to a maximum of 3 per player per turn. If a friendly operative discovers the relic, you score an additional 1 VP. And if a friendly operative controls the relic objective marker at the end of the battle, you score an additional 2 or 3 if that friendly operative is actually carrying it. For deployment, you can see there's the 2 L-shaped deployment zones. It's a very evenly spread out mission. There's not too much of an advantage to either side here or much difference. Probably the biggest benefit is having the oil rig in your deployment zone. That can be pretty helpful, getting an operative up onto that vantage point straight away. We rolled off to see who would be the attacker and the defender. The Admech took it away and chose to be the attacker for this mission, which, as I mentioned earlier, I think gave them the better of the 2 deployment zones. The one thing I did like about the setup that I had was that bottom left objective was quite accessible for me to get some operatives either through some doors, over the walls, or around the corner. There was quite a few ways I could tie up at least one objective pretty confidently, and I knew from the get-go that I was really wanting to put pressure in that middle objective. The other thing I was taking into account for the deployment was I didn't have too many, sniper units or weapons that were going to sit up the top and stay there the whole game, short of the heavy bolter, but I thought there was probably more dangerous positions to get that heavy bolter in than maybe being out of the game or only being able to see, 50% of the battlefield. The flip side of that coin, though, was that the Admech did have a lot of shooters, so I was hoping that that wasn't going to come back to haunt me. Time to pick the team, and by pick, I mean, well, I'm kind of a little bit limited here. I literally have the 1 squad of sisters, so there's not going to be too much versatility. It's going to be pretty much as modeled. Some of the options are great, some not so crash hot, but I'll still talk through what I've taken and probably what I would have liked to have taken as well. With the Sister Superior, you can see here she's modeled with the power weapon as well as a combi flamer. I actually don't mind the power weapon. That's what I would have chosen anyway. The combi flamer, on the other hand, is probably something I wouldn't have taken. I probably would have looked more like a plasma pistol or even the Inferno pistol, something like that. The plan's still the same even with this loadout though. Having that flame option once per game is still pretty handy. I want to be pushing her up to that middle objective and getting her amongst it pretty quick. There's no point wasting wasting that power sword at the back of the board. Especially with there being some infiltrator and some other close combat units, she could really turn the tide against them. And if they're not around to counter her, well, she can really dice up some of them regular Mechanicum boys. Next up, it's a Battle Sister Icon Bearer. Now, she's got the Icon of Purity, which is pretty handy. It basically lets you give one of your units a lethal 5-up if they're within blue of her, which is pretty handy. A good little buff because, I mean, there's not really a whole bunch of AP weapons, so getting that extra damage through some criticals could be pretty handy. For the 2 gunner options here, again, I was a little bit limited with what I'd modeled up. You can probably see there my heavy flamer model is actually just going to be the normal Ministorum flamer model. Please forgive me, just a little bit of proxying there. I think it looks pretty similar and it still looks pretty badass. This is the one I probably would have dropped against the Mechanicum. I really would have liked the Melter Gun. I am a little bit worried about those Infiltrator units, just because a lot of Bolters are great. They're relatively good at chipping away at units, but if those Infiltrators get into close combat with me, they're going to cause a little bit of trouble. The other one is modeled there with the Storm Bolter. This is a great weapon, but again, it's still it's a bolter weapon, just with Relentless. And that makes it a little bit difficult to get too excited about. I'll probably try and get this in a good position to pick off a few units, and kind of, I guess, this will be my sniper-esque unit, or that unit I'll use as a little bit of a longer range threat, because it can be so consistent. For my heavy gunner, I've taken the heavy bolter. I definitely think this is the better of the 2 there. Actually does add a bit of AP when you get those criticals. It's obviously heavy, which slows it down a little bit, but this can be a very consistent damage dealer if I can get it into the right spot. I'm hoping to move this sort of up into that terrain near the middle of the battlefield, hopefully overlooking that center objective to give a bit of fire support, and hopefully keep some of the AdMech's heavier weapons away from killing my models I'm trying to get to capture that. The rest of the team is made up of the Battle Sisters. They're just rocking the bolt guns and hitting people in the face with the gun butts. These are great models. They've got the 3+ save, but they are still APL 2 and they are only 8 wounds. So Space Marines, they ain't, but the survivability is still pretty good, and so is their damage output. So they should definitely do a little bit of work. Onto equipment now, and the first selection was the Rosarius for the Battle Sister Superior. Giving this operative a 4-up invulnerable save, pretty invaluable for this one, especially against the AdMech. They got a lot of AP guns, so this was definitely going to come in handy. Next up was the Vial of Restoration, which I put on the Battle Sister, who's the heavy gunner. Definitely need to keep that heavy bolter in the game for as long as possible. Last up, I just put 2 crack grenades onto 2 of my regular Battle Sister warriors, just to make sure I had a little bit of duality of threat, especially if there was some of the AdMech hiding behind some cover, and having a little bit more AP in the team. Now to have a closer look at my opponent today, and we're dealing with the AdMech Hunter Clade today, and let's just not talk about those 2 guys hiding in the back that aren't painted there, okay? These guys actually have a bit more utility than I first thought. They do actually have the ability to have some quite good close combat teams with Infiltrators and Rust Stalkers. Even the Alpha, when he's kitted out for close combat, can be quite damaging. But the big strength of this team is the big guns and what they can do with those big guns. In this list, my opponent's gone for having all 3 of the gunner options. So we've got one with the arc rifle, one with the plasma caliber, and then of course the transuranic arquebus. That's right. That's really easy to say. The big thing I was really going to have to concentrate for in this game was just making sure I was minimizing those lines of sight for these big guns. Obviously, they can be hugely damaging and really negating the benefit of having power armor in terms of what they can do with their AP. So that was going to be one of the main things, managing those lines of sights and using those heavy terrain and line of sight blocking terrain to my advantage. The other thing to keep in mind was that the Infiltrators and the Rust Stalkers, they're no slouches and they can really put out some hurt, especially in close combat. With the way my team is built up, I don't have any of the Repentia, I don't have any of the Arcos, so I don't really have anything that's really hugely strong in close combat. My Sister Superior really being my only close combat unit. So I didn't really want to get in a shootout with these guys, and I didn't really want to get into close combat, so I was really going to be playing a bit of a mid-range game, and that was where things like the crack grenades were going to come into it, and obviously my flame weapons as well. The other thing to keep in mind as well was the tricks they have, things like the Dictat, obviously he can do things with the enhanced data tether to give extra APL, so just really watching out for that ability for their operatives to either get to those middle objectives to search them before I could because they've got the APL and still take shots, extra movement, still shoot, things that they could do. Is definitely some versatility with that. And obviously the surveyor model as well, able to take away the benefits of cover, make sure that you can't be obscured. Those were operatives I was going to have to be very aware of. The other rule I think is really cool for the alpha is that they have the control edict, which is basically letting you chain activate as well. And this is really, really powerful, especially early game, either getting shots off before my units can get where they need to be, or to make sure that they're getting up the board really, really quickly. So especially early game, this is one I'm a little bit worried about. So just to reiterate, my plan with these guys will be to basically make sure I'm in that middle distance, not getting too up close and personal with them and managing that space. I know they've got some infiltrator units there that can cut me up. They've also got the alpha in close combat, but then they've also got those really long range heavy weapons. Obviously, I guess range doesn't matter as much in this game as it once does, but taking advantage or maximum advantage of my weapons, which do have that pentagon distance. So flamers, grenades, and really wanting to dominate those objectives in that mid-range game. We placed our barricades down next, and we both had pretty similar ideas. You can see I put both of my barricades up towards that middle objective to kind of give me some sections where I could leapfrog up to it, and also give me some more cover lines and ways to hide from those heavy weapons, hoping that they wouldn't get on some vantage points there to basically negate them. The Admech did a similar thing, putting one right near that middle objective. The second one they kind of just threw away. They were pretty happy with how their terrain was, and they probably could have used it potentially to give me a little bit more trouble on places that I had to jump over it or couldn't make it through as easily, but decided to just sort of put it out of the way at the back of the battlefield. On to TAC Ops, and I thought security was going to be my best bet here, especially with how this mission really encouraged you to take some locations, lock them down. So I was hoping to get a couple of the TAC Ops that were going to let me double up on what I was already trying to do. First up was damage limitation, and look, I was probably a little bit optimistic with this one, but definitely leaning into the idea that the Sisters of Battle are very durable with their 3-up power armor save, and the way I wanted to play to be making sure I was going to be avoiding a lot of their AP weapons, things like the Rosarius, also had the healing ability on their heavy bolter operative as well. I was kind of hoping I should be able to do this at least 2 turns. I was thinking with a little bit of good use of conceal, a little bit of cagey movement, hopefully I might be able to limit the amount of models that they could take out. Central control was my next one, and this was one of the first that I guess there was a little bit of a linchpin of how my game plan was going to play out and really what I wanted to do. I knew I could get to that bottom left objective very easily, and then I knew that the center was where it was going to be really, really contested. So I was basically writing off that objective in the top right of the battlefield and saying, that's theirs, there's not much I can do about that. But by taking central control, I could double up that fight over the middle of the battlefield, and obviously make sure if I can control that, I can obviously search for the relic, I can hold the middle of the battlefield, scoring victory points for that, and go a long way to securing the game. To work alongside that, I also got protect assets, because obviously we're going to be killing each other and fighting a lot around those objective points. I thought if they do hold that one at the back of the board, if they're not smart with their conceal, I might be able to pick some units off and get a cheeky kill there. But again, this is really concentrating all on that middle of the battlefield and taking that away and making my opponent want to come and have a bit of a slugfest in the middle of the battlefield where their deaths are worth even more to me, and getting my bodies in there is really encouraged as well. So a smart way to, double up those TAC Ops. As a defender, I had to set up first, so I was, I couldn't really hide my hand. I had to show what my intention was pretty early on. So to do this, I put the heavy bolter, flamer, and 2 of the just regular battle sister warriors down on that bottom left corner there, ready to push onto that objective straight away. With the heavy bolter as well, wanting to get her up onto that vantage point to look over both of those objectives. On the other side of the battlefield, using that terrain in the middle there, originally I was tempted to go right up to the extreme top right of my deployment zone, but I was a little bit worried about it being too exposed there to heavy weapons and making it very easy for the Admech to bring their weapons to bear. It also really forced that was only one way to go if I went there. So by deploying the rest of my teams, this was 3 of the Battle Sisters, the Icon Bearer, my Storm Bolter, and my Sister Superior. By deploying them in the middle here, I was able to still push to that middle objective, but maximizing the use of the heavy cover in the middle there to keep them protected. It also meant that if needed, if the Admech had ended up deploying in a way I hadn't foreseen, I'd be able to scurry them either left or right to counter that. If I had to push them hard right, it was going to take them a lot of the game to wheel back. Also, because that top right objective was completely out of play for me, I really had no intention of wanting to be anywhere near it and hoping that my opponent wasted some units trying to guard it. The AdMech had the wonderful joy of counter deploying, so getting to see a little bit of what I was wanting to do. And as predicted, they definitely put a lot of pressure right up to that extreme middle of the board there. So having the two of their infiltrators, they had their Vanguard Alpha, there's also the Dictat and the Arc Rifle straight into that middle objective. So in some ways this was good. I wanted them to put bodies on there so I could shoot them off the objective and score points off it, but also not too much that I wasn't going to be able to take it. The thing that surprised me a little bit at the back of the board was the other bunch of soldiers. So there was two of the Vanguard shock troops. There was the Transuranic Arquebus, again, still easy to say. I don't want anyone to ever have trouble with that. The Plasma, and they also had, as we called him, the Speed Camera up there. Obviously, they wanted to secure that objective in the top right, but it did surprise me there was no one going for those vantage points, especially the heavy weapons. It didn't appear they were going to be pushing onto those very early on. So kind of playing into my hand, that was my one big concern, was that big lump of sisters I had in the middle of the battlefield. They were only behind light terrain, so if he had have got some guns up there early, they could have been in a bit of trouble. In the scouting phase, we both went for the dash option. For me, this was all about getting my heavy bolter into a dangerous position early, so using that to push my heavy bolter up. For the AdMech, they used the dash as well to get their gunner with the Transuranic, the big long gun, into a dangerous position early on. For the first turning point, I activated Divine Shield, just in case, well, that, fear that maybe I had miscalculated and he was going to get a lot of shots off in that first turn. I was hoping Divine Shield would buy me a little bit of time and a little bit of extra life for my sisters so they could get to some actual cover. The AdMech went into the Protector Imperator. They also went Calculated Approach for 1 CP. This probably wasn't strictly necessary. Out of all my operatives, I only had one that was actually in attack mode, and that was my Flamer. So pretty limited in terms of options that could shoot. The AdMech kicked into gear, starting the turn with the initiative, and didn't waste any time getting the Transuranic Arquebus straight behind that first objective to give them a great opportunity to hold down that entire side of the battlefield. In some ways, this is kind of what I was hoping would happen, because now I could use that heavy terrain to limit the firing lines. I had to double check them though, because I wasn't sure how effective or how far I'd have to get up the board to be able to use them. The sisters' first move was to get the heavy gunner up to that vantage point, overlooking that middle objective, as well as all those juicy targets just to the left there behind that cover. She was in conceal, so obviously no firing this turn. She had to move too far anyway, but hoping next turn she was going to be a big deterrent, or they were going to have to charge her and get some units out of position, and hopefully I could counter. The Speeds Camera guy also moved across to that top right objective, and he searched it, giving them their first victory point of the game, but no luck on the roll, so no relic for the AdMech. I always get a little bit nervous during that, that's for sure. The next move here was I grabbed the Flamer and moved her through the doorway under the terrain there to put a bit of pressure on the objective on that bottom left side. The AdMech, being a little bit cagey here, just moved their Plasma up into the middle of the board. I think it was at this point that the AdMech General probably realized it's going to take quite a little while to get that guy into a really dangerous position. There's quite a bit of ground to cover there, so hopefully if he starts now, he'll be there and able to put some fire into the middle pretty quickly. Now it was time to start locking down that bottom left objective and get some bodies on there. I took one of the Bolter sisters, moved her across there. Unfortunately, it took a move and a dash to get there. It was a little bit further than I thought, so she didn't get to search at this turn, but was in a great position and in conceal for the next turn. The AdMech continued their caginess here, the Vanguard operative moving up next to the Plasma through the center of the board. Now it was the most aptly modeled sister on my team, the one with the grenade in at mid-throw, moved up to the center of the board. So this was going to give her some great options in the next turn to use that crack grenade, and also was a good counter for the Plasma and the shock trooper who were moving through the center of the board. If they did come through that doorway, she was in a position to get some fire on them straight away. The second Vanguard shock trooper at the top of the board finally took advantage and jumped up onto the vantage point. Again, taking him a little bit longer than he probably realized to get up there, but he was going to be annoying in the next few turns, that's for sure, because now he was going to have a good overview of the whole battlefield. It was time to keep putting pressure on the middle objective there, so I grabbed my Sister Superior and moved her up behind one of the barricades that I'd set up pre-game. She was still in a great position. There was no one that was going to be able to shoot her. She was still in conceal, and she did have the combi flamer, so if I got lucky with some positioning next turn, she was hopefully going to be able to put the hurt on the opposition. This was where I realised I had made my first mistake of the game. The Admech moved up the first of their infiltrators. Now, I forgot that the infiltrators, I thought they had a 6-inch range, but of course their stub carbines are pretty much just a bolt-up with balance. So they're a pretty handy shooting model as well. Much to my disgust, I found this out as he promptly took some shots at the Flamer, taking 7 damage off her. I even used a CP here to try and, keep her alive for a little bit longer or to limit the damage, but unfortunately, no luck, as always happens with most CP rolls. Not much could be done about that at the moment, so I just kept locking down that bottom left objective. I grabbed the next bolter sister, moved her across, and just used a bit of positioning to give her great line of sight over that bottom left objective, but also keeping her safe with her conceal order. The Dictat set up the other infiltrator for some big moves a bit later in the turn by giving the +1 AP to him, and then just snuggled into cover there to cause a little bit of trouble later. I shuffled up one of the Battle Sisters just to the edge of the light terrain there. Still being in conceal, she was pretty safe, but she was at a bit of an awkward distance this turn. To move her out into anywhere else was going to leave her pretty exposed in the middle there. So I thought if I sat her at the edge there, next turn I'd be able to push her up behind a barricade. The Infiltrator with the +1 AP moved and dashed up and then finished off the Flamer, with not much ceremony. It was over pretty quickly, unfortunately. She had just the 1 wound left. First blood to the Admech. My Icon Bearer just moved up behind the heavy cover there. I just sort of wasn't quite sure where I could get her in a dangerous position this early on. Obviously, I didn't want to push her through the doorway, which was originally my plan. As the Flamer had just shown us, the enemy could reach us there and put a bit of hurt on us. So I kept her just behind, so if they did advance through the door, she'd be able to counter, or if they overcommitted, she'd be able to push either through that doorway or along the bottom of the terrain there. The Admech caginess continued and they shuffled the arc rifle just into cover, gave them really good lines across that middle objective, so I was going to have to think of a way to deal with the arc rifle as soon as possible. The final bolter Battle Sister, that's tough to say, just shuffled next to the Icon Bearer. Now I'd seen what those infiltrators could do, I was actually a little bit concerned about that objective already. I'd basically put no damage on those infiltrators and they were heading down to cause a little bit of pain, and they'd taken out my Flamer, which was going to be one of my main deterrent units around that objective. So things weren't going as smoothly down there as I'd hoped. The Admech's last move for the turn was just to move their leader into some cover. Obviously, powerful pistol he's packing there. He's also got the power sword, so a little bit of a close combat powerhouse. I guess just setting him up potentially for some charges, and he was still pretty safe at the moment from any shooting. The last thing we did was move the Stormbolter up into some light cover, just to provide a little bit of a firing assistance in the next turn. Depending what the Arquebus does, if that moves or stays there, I might risk taking some pot shots at it. It also gives me a little bit of a firing line over that middle objective as well, so that's pretty handy. At the end of the turning point, the Admech revealed they'd scored their first victory point as well for one of their TAC ops with Calculated Eradication, which basically means when one of your imperatives is active for the kill team and the total wounds lost by the enemy operatives during that turning point is greater than it lost by the friendly operative, you score 1 VP. So he's now going to have to change his imperative to get the second one, but not a bad way to start the game. He also revealed that he had execution, so he was halfway to his first victory point on that one as well. So a pretty quiet start, only the one operative had died from either team, of course it was one from my team, and the Admech had a 2-0 lead on the Sisters, but I'm pretty confident here, the Sisters are in a good spot. We've set up the right way to get the objectives I want in this turn and be able to lock them down. I am just very, very nervous about those infiltrators. If they get in close combat with my Sisters, I think they're in trouble, so I'm going to have to get some fire on them. And they've got quite a few wounds. They're, got decent armor saves, and I don't have a whole bunch of AP weaponry, so this is going to take a little bit of daring here to get it done. We rolled off for initiative and thankfully the Sisters got it. A little bit of the Emperor's luck going our way there. To kick things off, I revealed a few TAC ops. I had revealed that I had damage limitation and central control, and also used the Emperor's guidance as well. I knew there was going to be a lot of gunfire and face shooting in this turn, so I wanted to make sure I could maximize that. To reply, the Admech kept their imperative, which did surprise me a little bit, obviously being a bit risky with some of their infiltrators about to be in close combat, but they do have a whole bunch of shooting, so I guess it was risk-reward for that one. They also spent a CP on calculated approach and neurostatic, and I was about to find out the hard way that neurostatic interference on the infiltrators, who were already up in my grill, is really, really painful. I kicked off the turn by deciding it was very important I got on the scoreboard. I took the sister with the bolt gun on the bottom left objective, searched it, got 1 victory point, rolled, no relic. That would have been pretty sweet that early in the game to lock that down, but no such luck. With her last AP, she also took a shot at the nearest infiltrator, taking 3 wounds off. In response, the infiltrator was a little bit upset about this, so he shuffled up and then took some shots back at the sister, also taking 3 wounds off her. The shooting was kicking off in a big way this turn. Next up, the heavy bolter lined up the arc rifle just behind cover there, and with a lucky little command point reroll there which blocked a critical, he was actually able to keep him alive. So he lost 4 wounds, but still alive, still to be a big pain in my neck. This could be a bit of return fire coming here to that poor sister. The Admech Dictat kicked off next and sent another AP towards the infiltrator again before taking those shots at the heavy bolter. This is what I was worried about, but very lucky for me, no hit. She got away unscratched on this one. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call a friendship ender in this game, that's for sure. After a few, multiple times of measuring, let's say, lots of double checking, I took my leader model, moved her up, and it turned out, luckily, with her big magical combi flamer, she could get close enough to hit all 3 units hiding behind that piece of cover. So that was the arc rifle, that was also the Dictat, and the leader were all lined up very juicily for there. Much to my opponent's disgust, I rolled really, really well with this as well and was able to finish off the arc rifle, kill the Dictat, and take 2 wounds off the leader. He rolled very well on that save. But that was a huge moment in the game, and I'm very happy with that. I feel like the Sister Superior has earned her biscuits right there. The infiltrator, howling with binaric rage and revenge in mind, I guess, fired at the bolter sister and did manage to kill her, but she'd done her job there and had got me the victory point. Next, I grabbed the red-headed sister. She moved to the middle, searched that before it got overrun, and gave me 1 victory point. We rolled for the relic, but alas, again, no such luck. The one thing I like about the Admech is a lot of their stuff sets them up for later in the turn and sets up some big moves. Here we saw the surveyor or the speed camera guy use his ability on the arquebus. He then also searched the relic that was at his feet, gained them 1 VP, but alas, no relic for them. My icon bearer used her magic doof stick and activated it, hopefully helping me get a few more criticals with the lethal 5-up that she could give to her friendly sister counterparts. The Vanguard, after sprinting across a lot of the battlefield, bursts through the door and takes a shot at the leader. Lucky for her, misses everything. Next up, the sister with the bolter peeking around the corner, takes aim at the already wounded infiltrator, and with the help of the banner's lethal 5-up, was able to finish him off. The Vanguard up on the vantage point shuffled forward, took a pot shot at the leader, and luckily for the leader, somehow managed to miss completely. Down in the bottom left, that fight for that objective was really heating up. The bolter sister climbed up on the wall under the vantage point, fired at the infiltrator, and missed. Even with a CP reroll, still managed to miss. This is becoming a bit of a theme. The Admech leader, still slightly on fire and very upset about what the Sister Superior had done, took aim with his pistol and shot and caused no damage. Truly, she was blessed by the Emperor. The Battle Sister with the bolter that definitely looks like a flamer, but it's definitely a bolter, so just ignore that. Pushed up hard forward into that light cover there. Now the arquebus was in that position. I was finding it really hard to get a good position where they could move up and not get cut down before they got into an effective spot. So luckily she was able to just get within cover range there, and I'll have to work out what to do with her next turn. The Admech Plasma Gunner, after dragging his butt across the whole battlefield, also burst through the door there and took aim at the sister holding the middle objective there, and managed to roll 3 2s and a 1. He must have been exhausted from that run. The Admech commander bravely spent a CP for a reroll and managed to get the hit that he well and truly deserved. Unluckily for him, the sister then did roll the 1 armor save she needed. It was becoming very messy in the middle here, and one of my greatest fears was realized when I couldn't get the Storm Bolter out from behind that cover and into a suitable position to impact the game. So I had a big decision to make here. I could use the Storm Bolter to kill that crucial plasma unit, and although he'd had a bad turn this turn, I didn't want to give him a second chance at shooting, but in doing so, I would be revealing the Storm Bolter model, and I couldn't get her to anything else but the light cover that she was behind. I took the risk, fired at the plasma, and thanks to the wonderful world of Relentless, she was able to destroy him quick smart so he never gets a second chance. But, as predicted, the Arquebus then very quickly targeted her and took her head off. Although the Storm Bolter had died, her sacrifice was a huge boon for the team because taking out that plasma gunner meant we got the victory point for central control. We also got one for protect assets, which was getting those kills around those objectives. So it was a good move. If she was only going to get one opportunity to impact the game, it was absolutely huge. The Admech unfortunately didn't score any more, so the scores were 3-4. Things were definitely heating up heading into turning point 3. The Admech gained the initiative again after we rolled off. Then the Admech decided to change their imperative to the equalized imperative. This was obviously going to help them score the second victory point on one of their attack ops as well. The Sisters decided to use none of their CP, saving it maybe for some crucial re-rolls. Things kicked off as expected with, well, looking for relics. That's what we're here for. The Admech Infiltrator on the bottom left objective, searched it, gained one victory point for the team, rolled, and lo and behold, managed to find the relic to get an extra victory point. The only issue for the Admech here is that he was very far in enemy territory and I guess technically surrounded. So of all the places for the Admech to find it, that was real danger zone. Even if at least it was in the middle, it was going to be contested. They could get bodies on there. This poor infiltrator didn't have much support. So to help himself out here, he decided to shoot as well and got 3 wounds off one of the Bolter Sisters. The Sister Superior, wanting to look very decisive here, decided it was time for the enemy leader to die and took her shots at him instead of charging. Unfortunately, this proved to be the wrong decision as she only took 4 wounds off him. In response, the Admech Vanguard up on the vantage point licked his lips thinking game over to the leader, taking off a massive 7 wounds. Things were looking pretty dire for her. Over that middle objective, which was now pretty much worthless, except for the fact that I had lots of attack ops there, I had to keep winning that, and the best way to do that was get rid of that Vanguard. So the Sister opened fire on the Vanguard, taking 3 wounds off him. The Vanguard on the middle objective fired at the leader, hoping to help out his own leader, but unfortunately was absolutely useless. The Sister, who'd been battling away in the middle of the board there, took aim with her one and only crack grenade and finished off the Vanguard there, clearing out the middle of the battlefield. Not the best use of a crack grenade, but there really wasn't much else going on, and I wanted to guarantee that I got him out of there. The Admech leader, who'd had a bit of a rough trot so far after being set on fire once and shot with bolters, finally got his revenge and finished off the Sister Superior. This gained the Admech Headhunter, so they got a victory point for that. He then followed that up by using the Motive Force to heal himself as well for 1 CP. It was getting pretty crucial. I needed to make sure I could kill the infiltrator who had discovered the relic. I got the first of the Sisters to open up with her bolter, taking off 3 wounds. Not ideal. These infiltrators were causing me a lot of trouble. It was one of the things that was becoming painfully obvious in this game. Bolter fire without the benefits of things like lots of rerolls or ceaseless or relentless. It's okay, it plinks away, but even the Admech with their 4-up saves, and in the case of the Infiltrator having the 10 wounds, they were giving me a lot of trouble. The Arquebus, realizing he was now heavily out of position after killing the only viable targets, took the big move and dash to get into a new position to hopefully put some fire on the middle of the board in the next turn. The second of the Sisters, overlooking that poor infiltrator covering the objective, finally got her chance to show how it was done and used her bolter to drop the infiltrator. The objective was now in the open and free. The speed camera surveyor took the chance to follow his Arquebus wielding friend and move towards the action. The heavy bolter, still on that vantage point, had seen the Arquebus move around into that dangerous position, and I was very confident here that I could knock him on the head and make it so they couldn't have an impact into the next turn. Unfortunately for me, the heavy bolter didn't do that great, only taking 5 wounds off and keeping the Arquebus in the game. The Admech actually moved into Overwatch here, and the Vanguard on the vantage point shot over at the Heavy Bolter on the vantage point, but unfortunately the light cover there really helped to cancel out any effectiveness for that, and there was no damage done. The last of the moves of the Sister with the icon moved lower on the battlefield there into cover for a chance to sprint towards the objective in the next turn. The Sisters followed up overall not a fantastic scoring turn by nailing both their objectives as well. So getting central control and protect assets for a second turn in a row, getting another 2 victory points was big, and that actually tied the scores up at 6-6. So a big turn 4 was heading our way. We rolled for initiative with the Sisters being lucky enough to get this one, and that was very, very crucial. They also spent the 1 CP for Divine Shield, because hopefully once if I can nab that objective now and hold on to it and pick it up for the extra bonus points, I need to be able to keep those models alive. So my first move was, as we set up in the last turn, the Icon Bearer was the lucky one to head on over and pick up the objective. I just had to keep her alive now. It was crunch time now for the Admech. They needed to take out some operatives. They needed to take away some of the heavy weapons so they could get some more firepower down onto the objective. The Arquebus tried to help, opening up on the Heavy Bolter, but with the wounded state, actually didn't do that well. I thought it would have been game over, but only took the 5 wounds off the Heavy Bolter. I moved the other Bolter Sister, who was down near the objective as well, just next to the Banner Bearer in case anything went haywire and the Banner Bearer got killed, that I'd still be able to control the objective at the end of the game. Next up, the Vanguard Shock Trooper on the vantage point took aim at the Heavy Bolter, and the Heavy Bolter again was able to survive. That Vanguard was really having a rough day with his shooting. Although the Arquebus was probably done for the game, out of spite, I tried to move one of my Bolter Sisters up. She opened fire and she actually fumbled it and couldn't finish him off. The Admech Speed Camera, who'd been spending the whole game trying to get into the fight, could only get up behind the door and couldn't get involved in any way, shape or form. Next game, mate. The red-headed champion moved up. She'd had a great game so far, had been crucial and instrumental through the middle of the battlefield, and to finish off her great game, she was able to head on up and kill the enemy leader. Even with a CP reroll, he was still very dead. This put the Admech into Overwatch as they were running out of models very, very fast. The Vanguard on the vantage point finally had his day and was able to finish off the Heavy Bolter. The Sister down near the middle objective fired up in vain up at the Vanguard and was only able to take 3 damage off. And with that, there was nothing else of note. The game was over, and with the Sisters in firm control of the objective being picked up and held by the Icon Bearer, they took the game out with an extra 3 victory points in what was actually a very close game and could have gone a number of ways. Back to me in the studio. So that's the battle, thanks to me down on the battlefield there. The Sisters of Battle have taken the game from the Hunter Clade. They've reclaimed whatever the thing was that made them fight and made them mad at each other. I'm sure it was some holy robot relic. Either way, Faith won in the end, didn't matter which team won. Faith was going to win. I really enjoyed playing the Sisters of Battle today. I think it was a really, really cool show off of their models, their versatility. They're just very consistent across the board. They don't have, there's no lollygaggers. There's no one wasting time on the team. They can all be dangerous and efficient. Having the 3-up power armor saves goes a long way to keeping them on the board for a lot longer. I definitely missed, which is weird because the Admech aren't a hugely strong team, but I definitely did notice not having a bunch of high AP weapons. I'm probably more used to a lot of the teams I play having at least 2 or 3 real, killer units. I didn't feel like the Sisters had that. Obviously, they also weren't equipped optimally. I'm just going to skip that word. You know what I mean? This was a group of units I'd built quite a long time ago, and they'd been sitting there gathering dust, and I needed a good excuse to paint them up and get them on the table, and I'm glad I did. I'm really curious now to see if I get some Arco units, if I can get some Sister Repentia. This has definitely whet the appetite for what they can do on the battlefield, and I'm very, very interested. In the past with the Sisters, I think I've been using the Negavolt cultists from Blackstone Fortress as some proxy ones, and they look really cool. We call them Whippy Wizards because of the little they got going on their heads, but they're a great little proxy model as well. But I want to get some of the proper ones, get them on the board and test them out. So if you enjoyed seeing the Sisters, if you enjoyed seeing the Hunter Clades, let me know. They can definitely both be return teams to the channel. As far as my opponent goes, look, I don't think he did a whole bunch wrong. it's just one of those things. He's a bit of a newer player to the game, so there's a few strategy things that he'd probably take back. And I think one of those biggest ones was probably not taking as much advantage of the vantage points that he had in his deployment zone. The Admech are a fantastic shooting team, and when they did have some of those, like the Arquebus in the right position, their battlefield control was actually quite big. There was definitely parts of the battlefield I either didn't want to or couldn't go to without fear of losing my units. Also, a few of those units that were set up right at the back of the battlefield really cost him too, in terms of by the time they arrived up to get amongst the ruckus in the middle, it was a little bit too late and I was able to actually pick them off. If those units had have been there a little bit earlier or been on vantage points firing down, I would have been in a lot more trouble. I really had trouble shifting some of those Admech bodies. They're actually surprisingly durable. A 4-up save isn't that bad. They've got ways to heal. They're a good team, and they're not a glass cannon team like I first assumed. The infiltrators both did a really good job too. It took me a long while to be able to clear them out. And while they were giving me so much grief, that would have been that great opportunity if he had have set up a little bit differently to get those gunners in position, because I had to respect them. He also got very unlucky with when he did find the relic where it was. Being down in that corner, effectively surrounded by my troops, was a huge advantage to me, and definitely counteracted the victory points he got for finding it. So that's not his fault. That's what a dice game does. It was a little bit of bad luck, and that's really what let me run away with it at the end. I still don't think he's forgiven me for the flamer incident either, but we won't bring that up again. We'll let that go. So that's it for another tactical battle report. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed making it. I'm really enjoying making this content for you guys. And as I said at the start of the video, that subscribe button means a whole bunch to me. The likes, all that stuff. Building this channel and the community around it is really, really important. It's what I really want to keep doing. So if you guys can take that 2 seconds to do that for me, it means a whole bunch. The more of those I get, the more of these videos I can create. And I hope you're really enjoying them. Make sure you leave a comment. Tell me what you like, what you don't. I'm still working on these. I'm still trying to make them better as well. And your input really does mean a lot. It's what's shaping them. I know I started these videos going, well, what kind of video would I like to see? And you guys are also helping me take that idea and make it even better. So I really, really appreciate your time with that. Until next time, guys, my name's Reese, and this is Threes to Wound.